Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be talking about the newest album from Muse called Simulation Theory. Alright, honest question. When Muse rolled out their plan to make an 80s inspired synth-driven pop rock album, did anybody think this was a good idea? Well, okay, in principle, it wasn't the worst idea. I prefer Muse do this than try to make reggae or hip-hop or bluegrass or death metal, but I've seen this sort of 80s pop pivot a lot in the 2010s, and Muse aiming to capitalize on nostalgia this blatantly seemed like a weird move, especially as their experimental tendencies tend to push them in very different directions. Say what you will about the mess of the Second Law with its warping dubstep touches or the grinding sludge of drones, at least they felt contemporary and moves that made credible sense coming from Muse, even if neither really worked in their entirety. Going for 80s synthesizers and softening their edge even further for a retro pastiche? Look, Muse is too weird and earnest to consider something like this as a cash grab, but as somebody who's always been kind of hit and miss on this band, I was concerned this could get really ugly, especially given the polarized critical response I have seen. And my feelings weren't exactly assuaged by the production team. Shellback, Timbaland, Mike Elizondo? Are we making an 80s pop rock project or something that would drop in the late 2000s? But alright, fine. What do we get out of Simulation Theory? Well, I can't believe I'm going to be the one saying this, but I don't hate this album by any stretch. I'm serious, I was expecting this to be a catastrophe, a gigantic untenable mess because Muse does not succeed or fail in moderation, but going through Simulation Theory multiple times, really over a dozen listens, while it is a total mess, I don't think it's terrible. Part of this was the understanding of the sonic roots of this project and being able to draw a parallel to songs and tones that have worked, at least for me. And once I got that, I didn't really find this album nearly as incomprehensible as I feel some people have branded it. That said, even though I can find some things to be positive about, I won't exactly say this is particularly good. Just because I really get it doesn't mean I always like it. And really, a lot of the problems are issues that I've had with Muse for years now, just all the more evident with a more straightforward retro pop rock gloss. So yeah, I'm not going to call this bad, but I'm also not going to call this good either. So let's start off with the production, because for as much as critics and even Muse themselves have played up more of the synthpop elements, I'd argue the sonic palette is actually a lot broader. Yeah, you get the thick, buzzing Casio keyboards and the programmed drums and the weird, spiky bass lines, but that was not exactly unique to just acts in 80s pop rock. Hell, on a few cuts, especially with Matt Bellamy's falsetto, it's pretty easy to see parallels with somebody like Prince, and the wonky acoustic tuning and the genre bending actually remind me a fair bit of Beck as well. And then when you combine them with the modern trap influences on mainstream pop that shows up on a couple songs here, the clearest 2018 parallels snapped into view. Man of the Woods by Justin Timberlake, an album that paradoxically gets better and worse every time I hear chunks of it. But it's really here. The wonky synth choices and attempts at grandiose funk that are significantly stiffer than they should be, the warping pileup of genres, the falsetto, the grinding rock and distorted electronics that feel bafflingly out of place, especially opposite the rest of the instrumentation. And yeah, it's messy, it's awkwardly structured, and seemingly designed to alienate Muse fans who are looking for progressive rock and have forgotten that Muse always makes some weird mainstream pivots, and I think there's an uncomfortable amount of truth in that last point, because like with Justin Timberlake, if you had given some of these songs to other acts, I think they'd wind up giving a lot more praise instead of the fact that Muse is making this style of music. Now granted, it's a little bit less true with Muse because of their brand of composition, and this is where we hit a major roadblock that has been true on the majority of Muse albums. Structure. Now, I've always been of the opinion that for as weird as Muse can be, they've got some great compositional ideas and melodic phrases, and they strike gold in two distinctive ways, either refining them down to their most streamlined and ruthless form, think songs like Madness or Uprising, or just blowing them up into hysterical extremes, see your Knights of Sidonia. But when Muse falls into the middle ground, you run into songs that have melodic ideas, but with little connective tissue or foundation to really drive them home. And when you're making more pop plot-centric songs, that structure becomes all the more important, especially when you can't distract with production gimmicks in the same way. Now granted, considering how damn cluttered so many of these mixes are, Muse is trying to distract and deflect in some ways. Look at the dark side. One of the better songs here, if only for maintaining some guitar foundation, but it loses focus on all the whooshing change-ups, the strings embellishments, and the added synthetic layers over everything, including the vocals, which you'd think they want to give some greater focus given Matt Bellamy's timbre is one of the band's most consistent strengths, and really still is here. And yet, the production that keeps happening. The weird blocky horn pickup and the wonky vocal mix on pressure that don't complement the noisy guitar lead against the sleigh bells. How much gurgling synth and sparking fuzz is dropped into the primarily acoustic groove of Something Human, which probably owes more to George Michael's faith than anything in 80s synthpop. And yes, I consider that a compliment. And then there's Get Up and Fight, which tries for overblown empowerment anthem with uncredited vocals from Tove Lo of all people, and it's actually got a pretty decent groove on the verses that becomes an overcompressed disaster on the hook. And then we get the songs that just flew entirely off the rails, and you already know some of them, with Propaganda being the first and the most obvious, with the stuttered synthetic vocal, the tinny trap skitter, and the weird attempt at blaring funk, none of which fits with the off-kilter acoustic interlude and how the song just never takes off properly. Then we got the farting industrial touches and the theremin on Break It To Me that seems half pulled from Nine Inch Nails' song Closer, followed not too soon afterwards by the overblown trap knock of Thought Contagion that might have some of the worst tonal balance between the synthesizers and the fidelities on the hooks and the verses that Muse has ever delivered. It's probably the worst song on the album for me. Hell, they even try to bring back their brand of dubstep on Dig Down, complete with overdubbed choral vocals and a blocky bass knock, somehow giving the guitars an incredibly weedy tone that also doesn't flatter anything. Hell, even though Algorithm, it takes a little bit too long to get going, and the Void never properly takes off the way it should, and Blockades got those weird borderline break beats and it's cribbing way too much from Uprising, the pulsating blend of strings, the buzzy synthesizers, and the grinding spicy guitar, they at least managed to hold something of a stable melodic progression and wind up being decent enough songs. Of course, some of this all could have been remedied if the lyrics actually mattered, and I'm not sure I can complete that sentiment with a straight face. Look, if there is one thing that I'm grateful about finally coming from simulation theory coming to the forefront here, it's exposing a theory that I've had about Muse for years now and that a lot of diehard fans fervently disagree with. That they might have their grandiose ideas and concepts, but there's little to no follow-through beyond that to really make the themes come together. And while the grand language of albums before, like The Second Law, they might have slightly disguised it, and Drones might have deflected through its overheated attempts at political subtext, simulation theory is refreshingly straightforward, almost single-minded, as damn near every song here is the exact same theme and subtext, breaking free of a dark, oppressive system. Sometimes our protagonist can do it himself, sometimes he needs help, sometimes he's helping somebody else, sometimes he needs a shot of information and truth to get through all those mental blockades, but the arc is damn near identical from song after song, and man, that drains so much flair from the album. Look, it's rare anybody will come to Muse for the lyrics anyway, but for an album that is trying so damn hard to experiment in its sound and production, for the writing to feel this pedestrian, even for modern pop rock, look, I'm not surprised. I knew this was coming from Muse, but I am sure as hell disappointed, because they could have pushed this harder. But and I can't believe I'm saying this, the by-the-numbers writing does avoid the pitfalls of the outright bad or misinformed writing of Drones, which means that I wind up finding myself at least being somewhat charitable towards simulation theory. Despite the mess of it all, and make no mistake, this project is a mess, there's enough solid melodies and tones that I like to save it from being outright bad. I'll say it again. But at the same time, given how sloppily it's all assembled, it's hard to avoid the feeling that there was a striking amount of waste here. Imagine if Muse had used their tones to take their broad, anti-authority subtext in a more concept-driven direction, or had assembled these songs with any sort of clear coherence, or just doubled down on really strong melodies that they still do have, but they didn't do that. And with that in mind, I'm giving it a strong 5 out of 10, and really just a recommendation for the diehard fans. For everybody else, well, at least it's not over long, which is normally a problem with Muse, so if you're curious, give it a try. But don't say I didn't warn you. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Again, diehard Muse fans, the comments, have fun. The poll's up there. You can all tell me how wrong I am. But beyond that, if you want to buy or stream the album, links are in the description down there below. Have fun. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all yours. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or help support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule, so I could have covered this album last week, as I was ideally planning. Beyond that, if you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.